The shelter at the edge of the spaceport was cold and silent. Rows of metal cages filled the room, each holding some broken creature from forgotten wars. Lights flickered weakly above, humming like tired stars. And among all the noise and steel, one small figure sat alone. A young alien girl with silver-white hair and pale glowing skin. Her big violet eyes stared through the bars, filled with sadness deeper than space itself. Captain Elias Ward walked through the shelter, his boots echoing on the floor. He wasn't there to rescue anyone. He was just supposed to inspect damaged supply drones. But his eyes caught the little alien girl sitting in the last cage. She didn't move, didn't speak, only hugged her knees and trembled quietly. Something inside him stopped, as if time itself froze. He looked at the guard beside him and asked softly, "What is she doing here?" The guard shrugged. "Abandoned during the war, sir. No record, no family, just a hybrid experiment." Elias frowned. "A child isn't an experiment." The guard said nothing, just looked away, bored. But Elias couldn't look away, not from those eyes that looked so human, so lost. He walked closer to the cage, kneeling slowly. The girl flinched, her tiny hands shaking. He spoke gently. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't answer, only blinked, tears shimmering under the dim lights. Her voice came like a whisper. "Please, don't send me away again." Elias felt something heavy move inside his chest. He had seen soldiers die, cities burn, planets fall, but nothing had ever made his heart ache like those 5 words. He stood up and turned to the guard. "Open the cage." The guard looked shocked. "Sir, she's not cleared for release." Elias said firmly. "Then clear her now." That night, against every rule in the Federation database, Captain Elias Ward signed the adoption code himself, a single digital signature that would change his life forever. He didn't know who she truly was, didn't care. He only knew she needed someone, and for once, he could be that person. When he opened the cage door, the girl hesitated, then slowly reached out her trembling hand. Elias took it gently, her fingers cold as snow. "You're safe now," he whispered. She looked up at him, confused but hopeful. A tiny spark of trust lit her eyes for the first time. He brought her home to his small outpost cabin on Luna 4. It wasn't much, just metal walls, warm lights, and an old heater, but it was safe. She sat quietly in a corner, afraid to eat, afraid to sleep. When he handed her food, she stared at it, as if expecting poison. He smiled softly. "You don't have to be afraid here." She finally took a bite. And for the first time since the war, Captain Elias heard laughter. Soft, nervous, but real. He didn't realize how much he had missed that sound. Later that night, she fell asleep near the heater, curled up like a kitten. Elias watched her and whispered to himself, "You're not alone anymore." But deep inside, a strange unease began to grow. He didn't know it yet, but this child was no ordinary alien. She carried secrets older than empires and power that could shake the stars. Outside, the galaxy moved on, unaware that something had changed. A war hero had broken the rules for the smallest reason imaginable: kindness. And somewhere, far across the stars, old enemies stirred, sensing a forgotten signal. The last of her kind had been found. And now, they were coming. Inside the cabin, the alien girl dreamed for the first time in years. Dreams of light, warmth, and a human who didn't walk away. The galaxy would one day remember this night. The night when a man chose compassion over command. The night when a simple act of love began a story that would never be forgotten. Morning came softly on Luna 4, lights spilling through the metal blinds like thin silver blades. The alien girl was already awake, sitting by the window, watching the dusty horizon. She looked calm, but Elias could tell her mind was far away, lost in something she couldn't say. When he placed a cup of warm nutrient tea beside her, she flinched slightly, then nodded in quiet thanks. "What should I call you?" he asked gently. She looked confused for a moment, then whispered, "They used to call me 47. Elias frowned. "That's not a name." She hesitated, eyes shimmering. "Then, you can choose one." He thought for a moment and said softly, "How about Lyra?" The girl repeated it slowly, tasting the word, Lyra. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. Days passed quietly. Lyra began to explore the small outpost cabin, learning human things, touching everything with curiosity. Sometimes she laughed when the heater made funny noises or when the old service droid tried to sing. And every time she laughed, Elias felt something deep inside him heal a little more. He didn't realize how empty his life had been until she filled it with small, fragile light. But strange things began to happen. At night, when Lyra dreamed, soft pulses of light came from her skin, gentle waves that made the air shimmer. The first time Elias saw it, he thought it was the heater malfunctioning. The second time, he knew it wasn't. He watched as faint symbols glowed across her forehead, ancient markings that looked almost like stars. He ran a quick scan with his wrist pad. The readings were impossible, energy levels higher than any known sentient species. She was emitting an unknown frequency, one that matched no human or alien tech on record. When he asked her about it, she looked away, frightened. "I don't remember," she said quietly, "but sometimes I see fire, planets burning, voices calling me princess." Elias froze. The word princess echoed in his mind like thunder. He'd heard rumors during the war of a royal bloodline wiped out in the Sorin Purge, a species said to command living light itself, rulers who vanished into legend. And now one of them was sitting in his cabin, calling him Papa between shy smiles. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood at the window, staring at the stars while Lyra slept peacefully. The data on his wrist pad glowed softly. Genetic origin, unknown. Potential class A entity. He whispered to himself, "What have I brought home?" Suddenly, a faint beep interrupted his thoughts. A transmission alert, encrypted, short range, not from the colony network. He opened the signal, and a mechanical voice whispered, "Subject 47 detected. Retrieval team inbound." Elias's blood ran cold. He looked at Lyra, still asleep under the soft light, her hair glowing faintly like spun silver. He turned off the signal immediately and locked every channel, his heart pounding. He knew what would happen if they found her. They would take her back, cut her open, dissect her power, and call it science. Not while he was alive, he thought. Not her. The next morning, Lyra noticed the packed bag near the door. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked softly. Elias forced a small smile. "Just a short trip, somewhere safer." She nodded, though her eyes filled with quiet worry. He knelt down and said, "Listen, no matter what happens, you stay close to me, okay?" She nodded again and reached out to hold his hand. Outside, engines hummed as dawn broke across the cratered plain. A small transport lifted off from the outpost, leaving behind a swirl of dust and light. Inside, the man and the alien girl sat side by side, silent, hearts heavy with unspoken truths. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were no longer running from danger. They were running toward destiny. And far beyond the orbit of Luna 4, a fleet of black ships changed course, tracking a faint, ancient signal. The lost princess of the stars was alive again, and her protector was human. The small transport ship cut through the darkness like a silver arrow. Stars streaked past the windows as Elias gripped the controls tightly. His eyes never left the radar, a faint red dot blinking steadily behind them. Someone was following, silent and precise. He didn't need confirmation. The Federation had found them. Lyra sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, her small hands gripping the edge. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the endless stars outside. She didn't speak, but Elias could feel her fear filling the cabin like cold mist. He forced a smile. "Don't worry, I've flown through worse." She nodded, though her voice trembled. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" He paused, then said softly, "They're coming for something they don't understand." The ship shook as a bright blue beam flashed past them. A warning shot. Elias cursed under his breath and pulled the ship into a dive. The engine screamed as he skimmed the edge of an asteroid belt. Rocks spun around them, colliding and breaking into sparks. But behind, 3 dark ships followed. Faster, heavier, relentless. Lyra pressed her palms together, whispering something in a language Elias didn't recognize. Suddenly, the stars around them seemed to bend, light twisting unnaturally. A thin layer of glowing dust spread from her skin, covering the walls like soft starlight. Elias stared in disbelief. "What are you doing?" she whispered, "Hiding us." And just like that, the radar blinked once, and went completely blank. The Federation ships passed by, blind to their presence. Elias let out a long breath, he didn't know he was holding. He turned to her slowly. "How did you do that?" She looked down, almost ashamed. "I don't know. It just happens when I'm scared." He studied her, realizing this wasn't just energy. It was something alive inside her, ancient and powerful. They hid among the asteroids for hours, waiting until the scanners were clear. Elias finally leaned back, exhaustion heavy in his bones. Lyra had fallen asleep beside him, her head resting gently on his arm. For the first time since the chase began, he allowed himself a small smile. Whatever she was, whatever danger she carried, he wouldn't abandon her. But peace never lasted long in the galaxy. A soft chime echoed from the ship's terminal, an encrypted message, old, dusty, forgotten. It wasn't from the Federation, it was something deeper, older. Elias opened it, and a hologram flickered to life, showing a tall alien woman with eyes like burning suns. "Whoever carries the light of the Starborn, protect her," the message said. "She is the last key, and the darkness will come for her soon." Then the hologram faded, leaving only silence. Elias stared at the empty space for a long time. Starborn, the word pulsed in his mind like an echo of destiny. He turned to look at Lyra, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that half the galaxy might be hunting her. He whispered, "You're not just a child, are you? You're something greater." Moments later, the radar beeped again, this time much closer. The enemy had found them again. Elias slammed the throttle forward, pushing the engines to their limit. Outside, asteroids shattered as they raced through the debris field. Laser fire flashed behind them, turning the darkness into violent blue light. "Hold on," he shouted, pulling the ship hard to the left. Lyra woke with a gasp, her eyes glowing like small suns. "Papa," she cried, as another beam struck their hull, shaking the ship violently. He tried to stabilize the controls, but the engine screamed in protest. Then, suddenly, Lyra placed her hand on the console. Light exploded from her palm, pure, golden, and alive. The ship stopped shaking, the hull repairing itself before his eyes. He stared, stunned. "You're fixing it?" She nodded softly, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to lose you." The last pursuing ship fired one final blast, and the light around them flared. It hit a shimmering wall of energy and scattered harmlessly into sparks. Then, in a heartbeat, they vanished, the transport ship gone from every radar in the system. Silence returned to the void. When Elias finally opened his eyes, they were no longer in the asteroid field. Outside, a strange blue planet shimmered below them, unknown and uncharted. Lyra smiled weakly. "I think I brought us somewhere safe." Elias looked at her, amazed, and whispered, "You didn't just save us, Lyra. You jumped through space." Far away, in the black corridors of a hidden fortress, a shadowy figure watched a holographic trace disappear. "The Starborn has awakened," he said coldly. "Then we will burn every world until we find her." When Elias opened his eyes again, everything was still. The sound of alarms had faded, replaced by a strange soft hum. Outside the cockpit window stretched a planet that glowed like sapphire mist. Its clouds shimmered with green light, and islands floated gently above the ocean like dreams frozen in time. Lyra was sitting up, pale but calm. Her small hands still glowed faintly, the last traces of energy fading from her skin. Elias blinked in disbelief. "Where are we?" She looked out the window with wide eyes. "I don't know, but it feels familiar." He ran a quick scan through the ship's console. No data, no coordinates, no record. Nothing in any Federation map matched this world. It was as if the planet didn't exist at all. He frowned. "A ghost planet, impossible." Lyra whispered. "Maybe it hid itself, just like I did." They landed on a wide meadow filled with glowing flowers. The air shimmered with soft light and gentle warmth. When Elias stepped out, his boots sank slightly into grass that pulsed like liquid emerald. Lyra followed him, her silver hair floating slightly, as if the air itself welcomed her. Everywhere they looked, the world seemed alive. Mountains whispered, rivers glowed, and the wind carried soft humming notes like a lullaby. Lyra reached out and touched a floating crystal vine. It bloomed instantly, releasing a sound like a heartbeat. Elias watched in silent awe. This isn't nature. This is design. They walked until they found ruins, tall silver towers wrapped in vines of light. Symbols marked the walls, ancient and glowing softly under Lyra's touch. She placed her hand on one of them and gasped. Memories flooded her mind. Flashes of fire, a golden throne, and a woman with eyes like burning stars. "She's my mother," Lyra whispered, trembling. Elias's heart tightened. "You remember?" Tears shimmered down her cheeks. She said, "I must find the world between worlds and awaken the light." Before Elias could ask what that meant, a deep rumble shook the ground. The air cracked with blue lightning. From the horizon, dark shapes emerged, tall mechanical constructs, moving like shadows come alive. Elias grabbed Lyra's hand. "Back to the ship now." But before they could run, a massive beam of energy crashed near them. The ground erupted, throwing Elias off his feet. He landed hard, vision spinning, ears ringing. Through the haze, he saw Lyra standing between him and the machines, her small frame shaking, but her eyes now blazing like suns. The constructs advanced, their red sensors locking onto her. One raised its weapon, charging another blast. And that's when Lyra screamed. Light exploded from her, bright, golden, and alive. The air rippled as a shockwave of pure energy spread outward. The machines froze mid-step, their armor melting into dust. The grass, the sky, the ruins, everything lit up with her glow. And then, silence. Elias staggered to his feet, shielding his eyes from the fading light. When the brilliance dimmed, Lyra stood at the center of a glowing circle. Her hair floated weightlessly, eyes shining with tears. "I didn't mean to hurt them," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias walked to her slowly and placed his hands on her shoulders. "It's okay," he said softly. "You protected us." She looked down, shaking. "I'm scared of what I am." He knelt and smiled gently. "Then I'll be scared with you." She stared at him, confusion melting into a fragile smile. And for a moment, under the alien sky, they weren't soldier and experiment, just father and daughter. But somewhere above them, in the orbit of the invisible planet, sensors came alive. A dark ship uncloaked, scanning the energy burst that had just reshaped a valley. Inside, a figure in armor whispered, "Signal confirmed. The Starborn is on Alarian." His voice was calm, cruel, and certain. He turned to his soldiers. "Prepare for descent. Bring her alive." Back on the surface, the air had grown still again. Lyra looked at the stars and whispered faintly, "They've found us, haven't they?" Elias looked up too, hand tightening around his blaster. "Yes," he said quietly. "But this time, they'll wish they hadn't." The wind carried the scent of ozone and light. The calm before a storm that would soon decide the fate of more than one world. And high above, unseen by either of them, destiny turned its gaze once more toward the girl who glowed like a star. The air above Alarian split open with fire. Dark ships pierced through the clouds like black daggers, their engines screaming. Elias watched from the ridge, his jaw tight. He'd seen war before, but never with something so personal at stake. Lyra stood beside him, her small hands trembling, eyes glowing faintly in the half-light. "They've come for me," she whispered. "I can feel them." Elias put a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then they'll have to go through me first." She looked up at him, frightened. "You can't fight them all, Papa." He smiled, a rough, tired smile. "You haven't seen what humans do when someone they love is in danger." Below, the first wave of drones landed. Tall, metallic soldiers moving in perfect formation. Their red optics scanned the field, weapons humming with deadly energy. Elias ran back to the ship, opening the weapons rack. Old plasma rifles, EMP charges, a combat drone from his war days, relics of battles long past. He grabbed what he could carry, tossing a small blaster to Lyra. She shook her head. "I don't want to hurt anyone." He looked at her softly. "Then help me protect them instead." They took position behind a cluster of glowing rocks. The first group of enemies marched into view. Elias took aim and fired, a single clean shot. One drone dropped instantly, its chest sparking blue. Then the others opened fire, and the meadow erupted into chaos. Energy bolts tore through the air, hitting the ground in bright explosions. Elias rolled aside, returning fire with precision and fury. Lyra crouched behind him, tears running down her cheeks as she felt every pulse of destruction around them. Her hands began to glow again, soft at first, then brighter. Elias noticed, shouting over the noise, "Lyra, focus that light. Don't fight it, guide it." She closed her eyes and whispered a single word in her ancient tongue. The world around her seemed to stop. A wave of golden light burst outward, covering the valley like dawn breaking through night. Every hostile machine froze, their circuits flickering and dying in silence. The light touched the ground, the air, even Elias's armor, and everything became still. Elias turned, stunned. The battlefield was quiet. The attackers gone, their wreckage scattered like dust. Lyra stood at the center, breathing hard. Her eyes dimmed, and she collapsed. Elias ran to catch her before she hit the ground. "Lyra, stay with me," he shouted, shaking her gently. Her voice was faint. "It's too much. I used too much light." He held her close, whispering, "You did good, kid. You did what no army could." But the silence didn't last. A shadow fell across the field as a massive command ship descended through the clouds. Unlike the drones, this one was alive, a biomechanical craft pulsing with red energy. From its hull stepped a tall figure in dark armor. His eyes glowed crimson, his voice echoing like thunder. "So, the Starborn survives, and her pet human defies the Federation." Elias laid Lyra down gently and stood, gripping his plasma rifle. "Come any closer," he growled, "and you'll find out what defiance really means." The armored figure laughed. "You think you can protect her? You're only human." Elias smiled coldly. "Exactly." He triggered the EMP detonators hidden beneath the rocks. A shockwave roared across the valley, frying half the enemy's systems. The command ship staggered, lights flickering wildly. Elias charged forward, firing shot after shot, covering Lyra with everything he had left. The commander raised his arm and struck him with a blast of crimson energy. Elias flew back, crashing into the dirt. Pain seared through his chest, his armor cracked. The commander stepped closer, raising his weapon for the final blow. And then the light returned, brighter than before. Lyra's body floated in the air, her hair shining like liquid silver. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered softly, "Don't hurt him." The world erupted in blinding radiance. The commander screamed as his armor melted into nothingness. The ship behind him disintegrated, breaking apart into fragments of fire and dust. When the light faded, only silence remained. Elias crawled forward, weak but alive. He found Lyra lying in the grass, unconscious but breathing. He pulled her close, whispering, "You saved us again, little star." The skies above Alarion cleared, revealing constellations that hadn't been seen in millennia. And high in orbit, hidden satellites began to activate, sending a message across the galaxy. The Starborn has awakened. Elias looked up at the stars, his voice a quiet promise. "They'll keep coming," he said, "but I'll be ready." Beside him, Lyra stirred faintly, her small hand finding his. Her voice was weak but filled with peace. "Home, we finally found it." Elias smiled through the pain. "Yeah, kid, we did." The smoke from the battle had barely settled. Alarion was quiet once again, its glowing field scarred by fire, but still alive. Elias sat beside the wreck of his ship, holding a small piece of cracked armor in his hands. It was all that remained of the enemy commander, proof that even the strongest could fall when facing something pure. Lyra lay nearby, resting under the shade of a silver tree. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Every now and then, soft light pulsed beneath her skin, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. Elias looked at her and whispered, "You did good, kid, better than anyone ever could." When she finally woke, her first words were soft and trembling. "Are they gone?" Elias nodded slowly. "For now." She looked around, eyes full of sorrow. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to protect you." He smiled. "And you did. You saved us both." But deep inside, he knew it wasn't over. If one fleet had found them, others would follow. And next time, it wouldn't be small. He began repairing what was left of their ship, using scavenged metal from the fallen drones. Lyra helped quietly, her fingers glowing with energy that fused metal like molten silver. She was learning to control her light, shaping it instead of letting it burst free. Days passed, and Alarion slowly healed. Where explosions had scorched the ground, new flowers bloomed, glowing brighter than before. It was as if the planet itself responded to Lyra's presence, growing stronger with her every breath. Sometimes, when the wind blew, Elias could almost hear whispers in the air, soft, ancient voices saying, "The Starborn has returned." Then, one night, the sky changed. Dozens of bright streaks appeared, not ships, but signals. Elias grabbed his scanner, and his heart froze. They weren't enemy transmissions. They were beacons, calling from across the stars. Different languages, different worlds, but all saying the same thing. Hope has returned. Lyra came to stand beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. "What is it?" she asked. Elias showed her the display, hundreds of glowing dots appearing across the galaxy. "Refugees," he said softly. "People who heard your light. They're coming here." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "They believe in me?" He smiled gently. "No, they believe in what you make them feel." Over the next few days, ships began to appear in Alarian's orbit. Not warships, small, battered transports carrying survivors, scientists, and drifters from distant worlds. Aliens of every kind landed on the planet, guided by the same signal. They looked at Lyra with awe, calling her the child of the dawn. Elias didn't know what to say, watching as strangers knelt before her. He whispered under his breath, "You didn't just save us, Lyra. You brought them hope." But hope always draws shadows. Far beyond the edge of known space, the Federation Council met in silence. Admirals argued, leaders shouted, until one voice cut through the noise. "The Starborn threat cannot be allowed to grow," said the Chancellor coldly. "Send the Armada." Back on Alarian, Lyra stood at the top of the ruins, the wind playing with her silver hair. Elias walked up beside her, holding a repaired blaster, his old war weapon, polished and ready. "They're coming again," he said quietly. She looked at him, eyes glowing faintly. "Then we'll protect them this time, together." He chuckled softly. "You sound like a soldier now." She smiled. "I learned from the best." The two of them stood side by side, watching the night sky shimmer with distant lights. Each star was a story, each spark a survivor answering her call. The legend was spreading faster than any ship could fly. Somewhere out there, soldiers whispered around their campfires. A human sheltered the lost child of light. And others replied, "And because of him, she shines again." As dawn broke, Alarian came alive with color. The refugees began rebuilding the ruins, turning them into homes and gardens. Lyra walked among them, laughing softly as alien children followed her glowing footsteps. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to dream again. Elias watched her from afar, his heart heavy with pride. He had fought countless battles, but this was the one that mattered. He whispered quietly, "If humanity is remembered for anything, let it be this. We protect the light, even when it isn't our own." Far beyond the stars, hidden eyes watched through deep space lenses. The Armada was on its way. But this time, the galaxy wouldn't face it alone. The rising light had begun, and it all started with a human who refused to walk away from a lonely alien girl. The stars above Alarian burned red. Not with beauty this time, but with war. The Federation Armada had arrived, stretching across the sky like a wall of steel and fire. Thousands of ships surrounded the planet, their engines glowing cold blue, their weapons charged and waiting. On the surface, Alarian's refugees watched the heavens with silent fear. The world that had given them hope was now under siege. Elias stood at the heart of the new settlement, his armor worn but shining in the morning light. He looked older, tired, yet stronger than ever. Beside him stood Lyra, her silver hair flowing like starlight, her eyes calm but burning with purpose. "They're coming," he said quietly. Lyra nodded. "Then we'll show them what the light can do." She turned to the gathered refugees, beings of every race and color. Her voice carried across the fields, soft but powerful. "They call me Starborn, but I'm not a queen, not a god. I'm just a girl who was saved by a human's kindness. And that kindness, it belongs to all of you now." Elias smiled faintly, pride shining in his weary eyes. He checked the comms, listening to the Federation orders echo through static. "Alarian is to be purged. The Starborn must not survive." He muttered, "They never learn, do they?" As the first wave of enemy ships entered the atmosphere, Alarian itself began to react. The ground shimmered, glowing veins of light spreading like roots. The planet was alive, responding to Lyra's call. Massive crystal towers rose from the soil, humming with ancient energy. The refugees watched in awe as Alarian transformed into a fortress of light. Elias climbed one of the towers, setting up the defense grid. He spoke into the radio. All stations ready. If they want a war, we'll give them a story they'll never forget. Lyra placed her hand on the ground, and light pulsed outward. Across the hills, the abandoned drones and ships repaired themselves, engines reigniting with golden fire. The Federation descended. Dozens of ships opened fire, sending beams of energy toward the planet. But instead of burning, the sky bent, the blast scattering like sparks on water. Lyra's voice echoed softly. No more death. The air shimmered as her power spread, turning the enemy's weapons into harmless light. Elias led the counterstrike, flying one of the rebuilt fighters through the storm. His old instincts returned. The soldier within awakened. He moved through enemy lines like a ghost, blasting engines, jamming signals. For every hit he took, 10 enemy ships fell. But even he knew it couldn't last forever. When a dreadnought locked onto his fighter, ready to fire, a sudden surge of golden energy wrapped around his ship. Lyra's voice whispered through the calm, "I've got you." The beam that should have killed him shattered into dust. He laughed through the static. "Guess I taught you well." On the ground, Lyra floated above the ruins, her light brighter than ever before. She wasn't afraid anymore. Every heartbeat echoed through the planet. Every breath a song of power. She saw every ship, every weapon, every soul filled with fear. And she whispered one word that shook the stars. "Stop." The universe seemed to obey. Engines went silent. Weapons shut down. Even the mighty dreadnought froze mid-orbit. Through the void, her voice carried, reaching every ship, every soldier, every heart. "We came from darkness, but even in the darkest night, there is one light that never fades, compassion." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked toward Elias's ship glowing in the sky. "And he taught me that." The Federation fleet didn't retreat out of fear. They simply couldn't continue. Their systems melted under the weight of her light. Alarian shone like a second sun, and across the galaxy, signals burst into life. Billions watched, hearing the words of a child who ended a war not with destruction, but mercy. When the sky finally cleared, the fleet was gone. Only the silence of peace remained. Elias landed his fighter beside her, stepping out with a weak smile. "Remind me not to argue with you again," he said softly. She laughed through her tears. "I learned from the best soldier in the galaxy." They stood together, watching the dawn rise over the shining world. The refugees gathered, cheering, crying, praying. Alarian had become a symbol, not of power, but of unity. The human and the alien child who changed the fate of galaxies by standing together. Later, when history was written, the galaxy would tell their story like a legend. Of a soldier who chose compassion over command, and a lonely girl who became the light that healed the stars. Every world remembered their names, Elias Ward and Lyra of Alarian. And in every corner of the universe, people whispered the same words. He took her home, and the galaxy never forgot what he did.